Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
Liver Ayush. කහ සබන් සඳක් වගේ බබලන පිවිතුරු සමකට.
Making headlines tonight. No more. Business chambers want trade unions and civil organizations to call off tomorrow's protests without undermining efforts to resolve economic crisis and promote tourism. New task. Finance Ministry state-owned enterprise restructuring unit assigned to study how to restructure national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines. Budget 2023. Second reading of the 2023 appropriation bill to be presented in Parliament in mid-November. Intense weather. Met Department warns of rainfall and thunder showers in the coming days. NBRO extends landslide warnings.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Indivadi Amuata. From Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. We take you to your top story tonight. Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara today announced that a shipment of diesel from China is expected to Sri Lanka at the end of November, which will help meet fuel needs in the country for several months. He added that imports of Russian oil and fuel are under consideration. Wijesekara made these comments on the sidelines of the Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition.
The Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition and Conference, or ADIPEC 2022, one of the leading trade fairs for the global oil and gas industry, opened yesterday under the patronage of UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Representing Sri Lanka, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara will address the ministerial panel of ADIPEC 2022, themed key policy considerations to deliver net zero ambitions in an uncertain time. Addressing the ministerial panel today, the minister said Sri Lanka has been facing a tough situation in the last 10 months due to difficulties in sourcing foreign exchange to finance fuel imports. However, Minister Wijesekara said the difficulties have created an opportunity to adjust the country's legal and policy framework to allow private suppliers to invest in Sri Lanka's energy sector. He added that by 2030, 70% of the country's power needs will be generated via renewable energy sources. Meanwhile, speaking to reporters on the sidelines of ADIPEC 2022, Minister Kanchana Wijesekara revealed that Sri Lanka is expecting a shipment of diesel from China, possibly by the end of November. He also said imports of Russian oil and fuel are still under consideration, pointing out that it does not matter where the fuel comes from as long as it is affordable for Sri Lanka.
Now, the Chinese embassy in Colombo donated 10.6 million litres of diesel to the farming and fisher community in Sri Lanka. The Chinese embassy in Sri Lanka, taking to Twitter, stated that the donation was made to upgrade the livelihood in the most affected sectors of the agriculture and fisher sector. According to the embassy, the shipment of diesel is scheduled to reach Sri Lanka between November and December this year. Six business chambers of the country want the planned protest tomorrow called off, highlighting that it would undermine the efforts being taken to resolve the current economic crisis with the support of the international community. These chambers point out that any act of destabilization taking place at this juncture and any negative publicity signs arising from the protests would seriously affect the measures that have been taken to revive the economy, including the promotion of tourism.
In a joint statement by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Young Lanka Entrepreneurs, Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka, International Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka, National Chamber of Exporters of Sri Lanka, Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce requested all parties to call off protests scheduled tomorrow, citing that it could undermine efforts being taken to resolve the current economic crisis with the support of the international community. The 6 business chambers say any act of destabilization taking place at this time and any negative publicity arising from it would seriously derail actions that are being taken to revive the economy, including the efforts being taken to promote tourism. In their joint statement, the chambers added that a few airlines have agreed to commence flights to Sri Lanka, and given the high cost of energy in Europe during winter, Sri Lanka will have an ideal opportunity to attract tourists once again, reviving the hospitality industry that has been badly affected since the Easter attacks. They said any instability can affect the recovery process for exports and foreign investment too. Finally, the 6 business chambers appealed to all parties to divert their energies and resources towards encouraging positive reforms and focus on how to recover as a nation, instead of engaging in acts that can further damage the economy and place more burden on the people.
The Cabinet has decided to assign the State-Owned Enterprises Restructuring Unit established under the Ministry of Finance to study how the restructuring of the national carrier, Sri Lankan Airlines, should be carried forward. The unit is also expected to make recommendations to the Cabinet on the methodology to be adopted. This development came in a backdrop where the government has sought to sell 49% stake of both Sri Lankan Airlines, or rather Sri Lankan catering of Sri Lankan Airlines, and the ground handling unit of the national carrier.
In August this year, Minister of Aviation Nimal Siripala de Silva said the government plans to call expressions of interest in a bid to sell 49% stake of each state-run Sri Lankan Airlines, catering and ground handling units as part of restructuring efforts of the national carrier. The minister said the revenue from the sale of Sri Lankan catering can be used to pay off debt amounting to $80 million that was obtained by mortgaging its shares as well as some other loans. He also said the management of these 2 entities will be handed over to the companies. However, Sri Lanka will hold 51% stake to protect the local ownership. Meanwhile, on the latest development pertaining to the restructuring, the government says the State-Owned Enterprises Restructuring Unit, established under the Ministry of Finance, Economic Stabilization and National Policies, will be assigned to study the restructuring methodology of the Sri Lankan Airlines and make recommendations to the Cabinet. The decision has been reached after taking the resolutions furnished by the Minister of Port, Shipping and Aviation into consideration.
Cabinet approved to hold the second reading of the 2023 Appropriation Bill on the 14th of November. Accordingly, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as the Minister of Finance, Economic Stabilization and National Policies, will deliver the budget speech to Parliament at 1:30 p.m. on November 14th. Now, the debate on the second reading of the Appropriation Bill will begin on the 15th of November and last 7 days. The vote on the 22nd of November.
The Cabinet of Ministers gave the green light yesterday to the program proposed for the budget debate for the fiscal year 2023. Accordingly, the second reading of the 2023 Appropriation Bill will be held on the 14th of this month. The debate on the second reading has been scheduled from the 15th of November until the 22nd of November, while the committee stage debate on the budget will be carried out from the 23rd of November until the 8th of December. Finally, a vote will be held on the 8th of December at 5 p.m. Meanwhile, the Cabinet also approved a proposal by Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena to not allow members to travel overseas during parliamentary sitting days as well as during the budget debate, unless in the case of urgent medical needs or official government duties. In the meantime, the Cabinet yesterday approved the proposal bill presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to amend the government's borrowing limit for the year 2022 to be gazetted and presented in the Parliament thereafter. On the 17th of October this year, the Cabinet granted approval for the preparation of a bill to revise the approved borrowing limit for the year 2022. The Attorney General also approved the bill prepared by the legal draftsman. Meanwhile, recommendations for the financial year 2023 have been submitted to the President by the Finance Commission in terms of the provisions of the Constitution. Considering the proposals, the Cabinet of Ministers granted approval to take appropriate measures to implement the recommendations forwarded by the Finance Commission and to submit the recommendations to Parliament in terms of Article 154(r)(7) of the Constitution. Further, the cabinet also approved a proposal presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to present 5 regulations gazetted to Parliament, containing regulations issued under Sections 2 and 5 of the Special Commodity Levy Act No. 48 of 2002. Accordingly, 2 gazette notifications containing regulations issued under Sections 2 of the Revenue Protection Act No. 19 of 1962, 2 gazette notifications containing regulations issued under Sections 14 of the Sri Lanka Export Development Act No. 40 of 1979, 2 gazette notifications containing regulations issued under Sections 3 of the Posts and Airports Development Levy Act No. 18 of 2011, and 1 gazette containing regulations issued under Section 2A of the Value Added Tax No. 6 of 2005 will be presented.
Well, a private member's proposal to amend the local authorities election ordinance with a view to creating opportunities for youth in governance was presented to President Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday. The proposal by parliamentarian Premnath Dolawatha was looking to raise the minimum youth representation at local government level and enable young people to play a constructive role in the country's governance.
A meeting was held at the Presidential Secretariat yesterday to inform the President about the private member's proposal presented by parliamentarian Premnath Dolawatha. The proposal is expected to strengthen President Ranil Wickremesinghe's policy of increasing opportunities for the youth in the country's decision-making process. During the meeting, MP Dolawatha said that his private member's proposal, which has been submitted as a bill to amend the 262 local government elections ordinance, adds constitutional value to the President's policy of providing more opportunities to young people in elections. The MP also said that the draft includes necessary provisions to ensure youth representation of at least 25% in the first and second nomination lists for local government elections. He noted that according to the recommendations of the Special Commission appointed to look into youth unrest in 1990, the importance of ensuring greater opportunities for the youth in a democratic representation was highlighted. However, he pointed out that although a positive step was taken by ensuring 25% representation of women at local government bodies, the condition of mandatory youth representation was lost in the relevant amendment. Dolawatha believes that his proposal will help the youth actively contribute to the decision-making process of the country.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe appointed a new chairman and commissioners to the Mediation Board's commission. Accordingly, retired Supreme Court Judge Hector Mapa will serve as the chairman of the Mediation Board's commission. The other members of the commission are retired Supreme Court Judge Nimal Disanayake, retired Appeals Court Judge Chandradasa Nanayakara, President's Counsel Vivekananda Puvitharana and J.W.S. Siriwardana. The Gazette Extraordinary relevant to the appointments was issued yesterday. The mediation process in Sri Lanka provides voluntary and semi-formal dispute resolution mechanism to enable speedy and free access to justice for people. Now, area residents of Kabitigo Lava as well as the families of the victims seek answers as a police sergeant is killed and an elephant attack leaves one individual dead. Details after this break.
Rhino පුතා හැබැයි යා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමුතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් Rhino නං වහලට safe තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino cement roofing sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Welcome back to the news. A tense situation erupted in Kabitigo Lava yesterday after an individual was killed in an elephant attack. Now, the tensions led to the death of a police sergeant after he was assaulted by protesters as unrest built up following the attack. With this being the case, police arrested 14 people in connection with the death of the police sergeant in Kabitigo Lava.
After a person was killed in the area of Kabitigo Lava yesterday by an elephant, the villagers had proceeded to block the road towards the town by setting fire to tires and coconut branches. The villagers had done so by alleging that the wildlife officers and those responsible had not executed their duties properly. Due to the tensions, the OIC of the Kabdigolava police station along with 4 other police officers had arrived in the area in order to control the situation. However, the villagers strongly opposed the arrival of the police. During the commotion, some of the villagers had assaulted the police officers. Police media spokesperson SSP Nihal Taldu said that some of the villagers had attacked a police sergeant and tried to steal his firearm. In order to control the situation, the Kabdigolava OIC fired shots into the air. By that time, however, the police sergeant had collapsed to the road. He was then admitted to the Kabdigolava hospital and he was later being transferred to Anuradhapura for further treatment. However, with the sergeant's condition becoming critical, he was immediately admitted to the Madavachiya hospital. However, it is reported that the police sergeant had already passed away. Meanwhile, with the protesters continuing to block the road, the riot police and the police had worked to disperse the group. After the crowds were dispersed, the corpse of the person attacked by the elephant was found in a nearby paddy field. In the meantime, the police arrested 14 suspects in connection with the tense situation. The deceased police sergeant was identified as 54-year-old AP Sunil, who is also father of 2.
Now, the Department of Meteorology today issued an advisory for heavy rains of above 150 millimetres for several areas across the island. The Met Department also warned of showery conditions to enhance due to the low-level atmospheric disturbance in the vicinity of Sri Lanka. Taking the weather patterns into account, the National Building Research Organisation meanwhile extended its early landslide warnings to areas in 8 districts.
Currently, several areas of Sri Lanka are experiencing heavy falls due to the development of disturbance in the lower atmosphere. And during the last 24-hour cycle ending at 8 a.m. today, the highest rainfall was recorded from the area of Vevaltalava in the Kegol district with 150 millimetres of rainfall. In this backdrop, the Met Department issued an advisory warning of heavy showers above 150 millimetres to several places in the western, Sabaragamuwa, central, northwestern, Uva and northern provinces. The Met Department further added that showers or thunder showers will occur over most parts of the island during the afternoon or night. They also warn of a higher chance of thunder showers in the sea areas off the coast extending from Batticaloa to Colombo via Trincomalee, Kankasanture and Putlam. Naval and fishing communities are requested to remain vigilant during the activities in the sea areas since there can be temporarily strong gusty winds and very rough seas during thunder showers. Meanwhile, the Met Department added that showery conditions across the island are expected to enhance in the coming days. In this backdrop, several incidents attributed to adverse weather conditions were reported from areas across the island. One such incident was reported from the Haramparawa area in the Bandarawala district, where a 72-year-old man died after a concrete wall collapsed onto his residence. A hearing-impaired woman also suffered serious injuries from the incident and is currently being treated at the Diathalava Base Hospital. A nearby residence was also damaged in the incident. Transportation along the Bandarawala-Haputale main road was also hampered after mounds of earth collapsed onto the road in several areas. Further, with falls received in the central hills, a dense fog covered the main roads of the area this morning. Meanwhile, a video on social media showed a tornado near the Jaffna-Pedurutuduwa ocean boundary. According to residents of the Jaffna area, the tornado had hit on the 30th of October. In other incidents, 2 spill gates of the Kukuleganga Reservoir were opened today due to a technical fault. Owing to the situation, the Department of Irrigation requests the residents of the low-lying areas adjoining the reservoir to remain vigilant. Taking the situation into account, the National Building Research Organisation extended its early landslide warnings until 2 p.m. tomorrow for several areas in 8 districts across the country.
Warning level 3 evacuation red notice was issued to Passara Division Secretary Division Badula District. Warning level 2 alert amber warning was issued to Ella Division Secretary Division Badula District, Gangihila Korle Division Secretary Division Kandy District, Badal Kumbara Division Secretary Division Monragala District. Warning level 1 watch yellow warning was issued to Pandaravela Division Secretary Division Badula District, Ruwanwella, Daranegala, Dehovita and Yatiyanthora Division Secretary Division Kegol District, Ridigama Division Secretary Division Kurunegala District, Kottapola Division Secretary Division Matra District, Madagama Division Secretary Division Monragala District, Ambukamu Korle and Norelia Division Secretary Division Norelia District, Ratnapura, Alapata, Nivitigala, Kalavana and Kurvita Division Secretary Division Ratnapura District. In addition to that, the rains occur in the other parts of the hilly areas in the country. The people who live in these areas be vigilant in cut-off failures, and road users also be careful about cut-off failures.
Also in news tonight, Malaysia donated medicine valued at 22 million rupees to Sri Lanka yesterday. The medicine was handed over by the Malaysian caretaker health minister, Khairi Jamaluddin, to the Sri Lankan High Commissioner in Malaysia, retired Air Chief Marshal Sumangala Dias at the Ministry of Health. Malaysia said the contribution symbolises the close relations and friendship between the two countries and the assistance to Sri Lanka's recovery from the current socio-economic crisis. The people of Malaysia, the Foreign Minister said, are with the people of Sri Lanka during this recovery period and hope that the contribution will assist the government of Sri Lanka in providing essential medical treatment and healthcare to the people. Taking you to business news, former acting governor of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, Professor Grant Spencer, says Sri Lanka's tax system needs to be reformed, adding that direct taxes in particular need to be restructured and reshaped due to too much reliance on indirect taxes. Now speaking at a special lecture organised by the Centre for Banking Studies on the theme Key Elements of a Market-Based Financial System, Professor Spencer said it is important to stop providing subsidies to state-owned enterprises, which is very costly for the economy.
There are 3 key elements to the path forward. The first is restoring confidence in the system by correcting current imbalances and reducing the vulnerability of the financial system to further shocks. So this is about sort of righting the ship. The ship's on a lean. The ship needs to be righted before it can move forward. The second stage is removing the emergency supports and restrictions. And then thirdly, implementing market-based reforms that can give new engines to the Sri Lankan economy to put it back on a sustainable growth path. Getting the public finances back on a sustainable footing, I think, is the most important thing to do to restore confidence. And the key element of that is reforming the tax system. I think everyone knows the tax system has been allowed to erode over time, and it really needs to be rebuilt. It needs a broad tax base with no exemptions. It should be one rule for all, and the broader you can make the tax base, then you don't have to have very high tax rates. So the key is to have uniform treatment in the tax system. And as we all know, the direct taxes in Sri Lanka in particular need to be restructured and reshaped because there's too much reliance at present on indirect taxes. Agents of the government working to get agreement with the international creditors, and this is very important to get agreement on a haircut of the international creditors, as well as terming out, pushing out the debt maturities to give Sri Lanka some breathing space in terms of those demands of the debt service, meeting debt service requirements. And also, this is one of the requirements before the IMF program can be finally agreed, because the IMF has learnt in the past that There's no point in dispersing new funds if it's just going to disappear to repay existing creditors. The central bank needs to make a detailed assessment of risks in the banking system, require the banks to undertake stress tests that assume there is going to be, for example, a global recession next year. I think that's highly likely. Plus the effects of deregulation, plus the effects of ongoing high interest rates. Okay, interest rates may come back, but they're still going to be high. These are the sort of things that the banking system needs to be able to sustain. With the results of those tests, the vulnerable banks and the weakest banks have to be dealt with, potentially through mergers, but they have to restore their health somehow, and the government and central bank need to work on that with the banks themselves. Public sector reform, it's important to stop the subsidies to the SOEs. The SOEs are an important part of the economy, and if they're getting cheap money, they're getting guarantees on their debt, they're getting subsidies, that's very costly for the economy. There's a need to reform SOEs and the financing of SOEs. The government should also look to improve the financial control over the permanent government departments.
Now, Colombo stocks ended higher today with the main index edging up as a result of price gains in counters such as Expo Lanka Holdings, SMB Leasing Non-Voting and the Lanka Hospitals Corporation. Market turnover crossed 12 billion rupees during the close of today's session. The ASPI closed 3.69 points higher to end at 8,605.85, while the S&P SL20 also closed higher, gaining 19.99. High net worth and institutional investor participation was noted in John Keells Holdings and Haley's counters. Mixed interest was observed in Expo Lanka Holdings, Lanka IOC, and retail interest was noted in Brown's Investments, SMB Leasing Non-Voting, and LOLC Finance. Foreign participation in market activity remained subdued, with foreigners closing as net buyers during today's session. Now, European stocks rose in early trading today, supported by speculation among investors that central banks could come to the end of their rate hiking cycles. The MSCI World Equity Index, which tracks shares in 47 countries, was up by 0.6% on the day, holding close to last week's high. Europe's Stocks 600 rose to its highest in more than 6 weeks, up by 1.3% on the day. London's FTSE 100 was up by 1.55%, while Germany's DAX was up by 1.1%. Meanwhile, British energy giant BP reported stronger than expected third-quarter profits from a year earlier to $8.15 billion, lifted by strong natural gas trading. Welcome back to the news. One person was killed and about 20 were wounded on Halloween night in two separate shooting attacks in the U.S. cities of Kansas and Chicago. Between 5 and 7 people were shot and one was killed in a shooting at a home in Kansas City, while 14 people, including 2 children and a teenager, were injured in a drive-by shooting incident in Chicago.
A series of mass shootings were reported on the Halloween night from the cities of Kansas and Chicago in the US. In one incident that took place at a home in the Kansas City, where about 100 high school-age students were partying, between 5 to 7 people were shot and a person was killed. According to foreign media reports, some individuals unknown to the homeowners had opened fire when they were asked to leave the premise. Meanwhile, in Chicago, 14 people, including 2 children and a teenager, were injured in a drive-by shooting incident in an area where people were gathered for a vigil. 7 of the injured, including the 3 minors, were either in serious or critical condition. However, according to the Chicago police, there were no immediate reports of death. The police went on to explain that the 2 shooters who were traveling in a dark SUV shot at a group who were standing at a busy intersection of California Avenue and Polk Street, where some of the people were releasing balloons during a vigil. They also corrected an earlier statement which said that as many as 14 were shot, stating that only 13 were hit by gunfire while one was struck by a vehicle. Investigators are trying to determine a motive and get a description of the car and those responsible. According to police, the shooting was over in a matter of seconds and was captured in a video, which police are reviving. However, no one was in custody so far. According to the non-profit Gun Violence Archive, more than 500 mass shootings have occurred in the United States so far this year, an average of more than 1.8 mass shootings every day.
Well, that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9 on AdaDerana 24. For the very latest developments, you may follow us on our social media accounts. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit adaderana.lk.